having a physician realtor is really unique because as a doctor, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but you feel like you're always worried that people are taking advantage of you.
Welcome to the Physicians and Properties Podcast, the show where we teach you how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want.
Doctor! 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 Doctor!
Now, here's your host, Dr. 𝗪𝗍𝗍𝗍.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Physicians and Properties Podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. Amy Couturier. She is a general pediatrician who left traditional medicine to build a direct primary care practice, and then she later helped build a concierge medical practice. Now she's focused full-time on real estate. She's helping others, especially physicians, find deals and invest wisely. She's based in Traverse City, Michigan, and has built a custom home in a fast-growing area, created equity, and is now building a portfolio of investment properties. Amy, welcome to the show. So great to have you on the podcast, and I'm honored that this is your first one. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to dive in.
Absolutely. Me too. Well, for those who are meeting you for the first time, do you mind kind of giving us the short version of your journey into medicine and then from general pediatrics to direct primary care to concierge medicine and now to real estate? So take as much time as you need. It doesn't have to be the short version.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if I could cover that in a short. So, my journey started when I was a kid. I grew up with real estate. We had rentals growing up. I remember going to our rentals, collecting physical rent checks or cash, working on houses, painting them with my dad, things like that. So I was always thinking about real estate and thinking about when that would be as part of my life as an adult. But I wanted to go to medical school, wanted to become a professional in some manner. My parents were immigrants to the country, and having that degree really made me feel that we could do so much more and reach so many more people. Ended up going to medical school. But I have to say I was always very entrepreneurial from the start. Even in college, I started a magazine, like 40,000 prints across 4 universities. Had a team of editors, and it was just started with like a fun club to socialize and get to know people, and ended up sort of becoming a business. It was nonprofit. And so I did that. And then I ended up going on to do Teach for America. So learned a lot of leadership skills there, thought a little bit more about how I want to help people in medicine. Ended up going to medical school at Michigan State University, spent a year in Lansing, Michigan, and then the last 3 years in Grand Rapids, where I met my husband. So that was wonderful. He and I share a very entrepreneurial spirit. When we got together, we would just talk about big dreams, what we wanted to accomplish, and we were always so excited about that possibility when the time was right. So we ended up couples matching, went to Cleveland, Ohio. I did my pediatric training at Rainbow Babies and Children's, became a general practitioner. Spencer, my husband, is now a radiologist. We ended up moving to the Bay Area in California, where my family's from. And I took a job with Kaiser Permanente, Northern California. And that was a really cool opportunity because they had just opened a new site in San Jose, California. And they were looking for physicians who wanted to, build their practice in this new location. And me being new, not really having a patient panel, I was like, yes, this is great. I can be an entrepreneur again. I can, tap into those leadership skills that I've kind of put aside for a while during medical school and residency. And that was a really fun experience of how do we build a practice within a big system, but it was really fun to just think about how we would operate together as a team of 5 physicians there. So I learned a lot. I did a lot of leadership in terms of immunizations, asthma, just a lot of business kind of leadership as well, really from the start of my attending life. And then we moved to Michigan. We decided to move here where Spencer's family is and build roots, raise our kids in an area where we're surrounded by nature, and it feels like a wonderful place to live and also raise a family. So we decided to move here in 2020. we had known about the move in 2019. So we actually bought land on a physician's loan, barely got qualified, actually. It was turned down by the first bank, and then ended up having to scramble at the last minute to get funds, our 10% down on the land. And we wanted to build our first home. We were renting. We didn't have a primary home at this point, and we wanted to get right into a custom build. So we bought land on the water, and it was beautiful. And so we decided, but then COVID hit. So a year later, we were getting ready to break ground, and the cost of everything was just out of control and unpredictable. That is like a whole nother story for a different day. But we decided, we got through it, took 2 years to build and finish the project. And since then, the real estate market in Traverse City has climbed tremendously, as nationwide. We've seen that. But especially here. And now we are ready to think about real estate from an investment standpoint. So.
That is awesome. What a great summary. And you crushed it. That was amazing. And your journey has been incredible. I'd love to pull on a few threads, though, from what you described that I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about. The exposure to rentals as a kid and being out there and collecting the checks and painting the buildings and all those sorts of things. Do you think that was intentional from your family in regards to that exposure? And how do you think that impacted your entrepreneurial spirit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think my parents' intention was just to show us the value of hard work. They wanted to show us how that having good relationships with their tenants would pay off in the end, that it was important, that they're taking care of your property. There's a sort of like honor to that. And so I picked up on this level of respect that you would have for your tenants, which, is, I think, unique. And then two, just the work ethic, that it's not always easy, that when things go wrong, it's okay, that taking risks is okay and worthwhile oftentimes. And yeah, they're incredible people. They came to this country with no money, worked odd jobs, saved money, couldn't speak English, got into real estate. And
you said that they immigrated here and they didn't have much money, and then that's when I lost you.
Yeah. So my parents, they immigrated here from India, and, with no money, saved money on the side, doing odd jobs, and bought property pretty early on in Chicago and then in California. So maybe by the time I was a kid, I think we had 2 or 3 like townhouses that my parents owned.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'm always, I have a 5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and always, thinking about ways that I can expose them to entrepreneurship. And so it's always exciting to hear, different stories of folks who had that exposure and learn, from parents who did it and did it well. And obviously it worked for you, given your entrepreneurial drive going forward. My 5-year-old Jack, he's already like all about making money, almost maybe too much. Like, we have some chickens. He like sells the chicken eggs. He's done lemonade stands, like all the above. It's he definitely has the entrepreneurial bug for sure. And so I'm excited to see him turn into a little businessman. But it's always helpful to hear different stories about how folks got that exposure and how we can help, raise our kids to have that same drive. And so thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned Teach for America. I've had some friends who have done Teach for America, and it was completely life-changing for them. What was that like for you? What was your experience in Teach for America like?
Yeah, I stumbled upon it, actually. I was looking for a gap year. I wanted to take some time before diving into into medical school. And so I decided that a program like that would be great. It would give me the time. It would give me lots of valuable experience. And, you're helping kids who need it, right? So I ended up throwing in an application like the night before the 3rd cycle, and then sort of realized what Teach for America is all about after. I ended up going for the interview, and I just loved it. I loved the entrepreneurial spirit of the organization, what the work that they were doing. I just thought it was so smart and helpful. And it was amazing on like a big picture level. On a personal level, I think I'm still friends with some of my kids actually, to this day, but it was really, really formative experience, getting, having these close relationships with kids who look at you like, you are their future. You're there to really help them succeed and push forward. And that was just really inspiring.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, I still think back to some teachers I had when I was young that I, still remember like it was yesterday, and how much of an impact that I had. And it was probably also really helpful for you as you later became a pediatrician to understand, the environment that some of these kids were in, and those social determinants of health probably were much more real having that exposure. And so you realized like that probably made you a better pediatrician, I would imagine, having that experience with Teach for America.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the reasons why I probably picked pediatrics, right, was probably from that experience, just knowing how kids learn, how they think, the development, I just find so interesting, and an opportunity,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to kind of hit your journey through direct primary care, concierge, and your career evolution. What kind of pushed you away from more traditional medicine towards DPC and concierge?
Yeah, I've always had this entrepreneurial leadership drive. We moved here in 2020, and practices weren't hiring. I think they weren't sure what the future held, how many office visits they would have. It's just the business of medicine was a little bit unsure, possibly. And so I didn't have a place to work for a year, which was fine. I spent the year with my kids. In lockdown and in a new city where we didn't know anybody. I think I had one friend, and nobody knew that I was a physician who had just moved to this area. And I was starting to read a lot online about direct primary care. And I said, well, if I'm going to try that, if I ever want to, maybe now is the perfect time. We have non-competes and things like that in Michigan. So that was one of the reasons why not? Let's just try and see what happens. And so we decided to open up, I decided to open up my pediatric practice, which I think is the first direct primary care practice in the state of Michigan. This was April of 2021, about a year into COVID. And I learned a lot about marketing. That was something new I had never done before, how to market yourself, how to, charge people money. And that's not something we do in medicine. So I learned a lot through the online support and other physicians doing the same thing. It was a great way for me to meet the community. I made lots of friends really quickly and was able to network quite fast. And it made me really happy to live in a place that was really new to me, now knowing that I have roots, that I have my own connections here. So that was really nice. That experience, there's so much that goes into direct primary care. But for me, it was really great for a few years. Some of the challenges that I faced were, we live in a small town. So I think just the sheer number of clients or patients I would be able to get felt like there was maybe a ceiling there. The other aspect was I lost physician coverage. That physician ended up getting a job, and I started to sort of do it alone. It was hard to find people to cover. I started really feeling a lot of pressure from being a solo physician. I also was pregnant with our third kid at this time, building our custom home, and my husband had also started a concierge practice. So this was about a year in, and I was feeling all kinds of time pressure, financial pressure, and I was the one who needed to be flexible for us, and it was just a lot. And so I decided to actually close it April of 25 last year, so about 4 years exactly. Bittersweet, still miss my patients, friends here locally, and I just took some time off in the last few months. During this time, I was also helping. So my husband also opened up a cash pay concierge medical practice, maybe a year and a half into mine. And for a while, and that was really great. We ended up partnering with three other physicians. So it was a group of four of us. We're all friends. We decided, let's just do this together. And so my husband was really working on that. And then I started to get involved after about a year. There was some struggle in the beginning as to what our services are, how we're going to have stable income, things like that. And so I started getting involved and I said, hey, I just did this. I can help, over here. So I started doing a lot of the marketing, getting clients for the practice, honing down on what our services are, working closely with our physician who had left his job. And I just felt really, at this point, I started to feel really, really strong for physicians. They're physicians taking risks, leaving their traditional practices to start a business, a startup company, essentially. And I just felt like we cannot let this fail. Like I did my practice. I knew the hardships for me. I'm not going to let that happen again. So I ended up really working hard on that practice for about 2 years, and now they're doing really well. Things are great. They're growing and everything is great. Physicians are happy. We're hiring another doctor there. We brought on a nurse. There's so much excitement. It's awesome. So I felt that, maybe it's time I can step away, let my husband kind of take over the business development, and for me to move on to the next entrepreneurial, business. Yeah, the next thing, and that would be real estate for me.
That is awesome. What a cool journey. And I'm sure that each of those steps taught you a lot about autonomy and ownership and practicing medicine on your own terms. How do you think that's impacted, I guess, kind of your thoughts amongst risk, or your thoughts of kind of stepping away from medicine for a bit? Because I know there's a lot of folks who are listening to this who have probably in the back of their mind thought like, I would love to start a concierge practice or DPC, or take a couple of days off per week and pursue some sort of alternative income stream. What are your thoughts in regards to risk and getting started?
Yeah, and that question I get a lot from friends of mine who are physicians. I would say I probably have had hundreds of these conversations over the last few years. And what I realize is for everybody, that looks different, right? So for somebody, it might be a complete change into DPC, and that getting that autonomy back, that time back, the deciding when you're going to work, when you may not work. For others, it may just be that they might want to have a passive income stream and not completely uphaul their life and their job and change everything. So I think that change, or this thought about what else could you do as a doctor or as a healthcare professional, I think it looks different for everybody and their situation and their risk tolerance. And my advice would be a little bit at a time. What is it, if you could pick one thing about your current situation, your job, your lifestyle that you want to see improve, that's where I would start. And then I would say, okay, if it's just money back, I want to have multiple income streams so I don't feel so financially pressured. There's lots of solutions for that. If it's about time pressure, I think there are different ways to think about that too, and to orchestrate what that might look like. So I work with a lot of friends, just casually, socially, who come to us often because we've built businesses and have now doing real estate and different things. They are always asking for advice for themselves. And that's, for me, that's really empowering. And so that's why I'm also doing this, the work of being a realtor now, actually, because I want to help other people just like ourselves to give them that confidence to buy their first investment, or start, developing a portfolio.
How would you like to build real estate cash flow without dealing with tenants, toilets, or late night maintenance calls? This episode is brought to you by Rent to Retirement. If you're a busy physician or professional who wants passive income and long-term wealth through real estate, Rent to Retirement has been helping investors do exactly that for over 15 years. They offer fully managed turnkey rental properties in some of the best markets in the country, including opportunities priced up to $40,000 below market value. Their properties have delivered average projected returns in the 15 to 20% annual range. And in some cases, you can get started with as little as 5% down. The best part is these are often A-class properties generating $500 per month or more in passive income. And their team, they handle the heavy lifting, including property management. Thousands of investors have used this strategy to generate portfolios, creating over $10,000 per month in passive income. To learn more, click the link below in the show notes or visit renttoretirement.com. And be sure to check out episode 70 of the Physicians and Properties podcast, where I sat down with CEO Dr. Zach Lemaster to break it all down. I love that. Yeah, that is a great answer. And, I think the other caveat to that too is, if you're starting slow and you're, working through this and you're generating more and more alternative income or passive income over time, it's going to give you more freedom and flexibility, let you take some bigger risk. And then worst comes to worst, you can always go back to what you were doing previously. There's no shortage of physician jobs, that's for sure. I love that. That is really helpful. I wanted to hit one more thing real quick for folks who are thinking about starting a practice and doing that in partnership. What your thoughts are there, because I know a lot of times in direct primary care, a lot of the stressors that people have is what you mentioned. How do I get coverage? How do I take leave? How do I go on vacation if I have this empanelment who basically expects to have access to me in some capacity at all times? I don't know if you know my journey, but I did about 6 months of direct primary care part-time, which I loved, just joined a practice and came on, and I absolutely loved it. For me, I ended up leaving the practice because it was really hard to provide the level of care that I wanted to when I was only there 2 days per week. And I had patients who really wanted to see me that then needed to see the other doc and vice versa. And so it just made it a little bit more complicated. So I decided to step away, but I love DPC and it's a great model. But the doc that I was working with, Dave, that's something that he struggled with and struggles with now is like, hey, coverage, who's going to help me cover when I'm going on vacation? So what are your thoughts around that? What are your thoughts around partnership with other physicians to start a practice?
Yeah. It's probably the easiest in terms of a business relationship to just do it solo. I would say there's just so many benefits. You just have so much freedom to make mistakes, to try different things, to not really have to ask anybody. So I would say most people might assume that I would have said the opposite, but I think going solo, I think is really nice. And there are ways to get coverage. There are ways to pay for that. There are ways to just set the expectations with patients as well. It's not easy. I didn't have an easy time doing that. But it's something that is fixable and there's workarounds. And same with real estate, right? There's so many of these parallels. Like if you're buying a property, okay, if it's not set up well, it's not perfect, it's not cash flowing optimally, there's fixes, there's ways to improve all that. So similarly with when you start a practice. But the benefits of doing it with another partner or partners is, you just, the liability of your decision making is a little bit spread out. So it feels more maybe collaborative in that environment. It feels that you have two heads, that are maybe better than one, things like that. My advice would be if it's traditional direct primary care, I think I've seen it work really well with just one other partner. And where you're really aligned on work, what you want out of it, and what you're both willing to do. And I think thinking about equality of the work and also the income and the business aspect that goes into the direct primary care, those are all really important things to think about. So yeah, I think it's probably easiest if you're solo, just from like keeping things simple, but having people that you can work alongside with is probably the sweet spot. If there's multiple DPCs in an area, then I would say that's great, because then you can just sort of trade and partner and help each other.
Yeah, that's a really great way to do it, is find other DPCs in the area and see if, hey, I'll cover for you if you can cover for me, and work that way, which works out really, really well. Amy, let's talk about identity. And did you have any struggles at all with that as you kind of, pivoted more from traditional medicine and all along your journey into now, more on the real estate side? Did you have any struggles with identity?
100%. Still do. I think identity, there's so much when you are a physician, it becomes part of your identity. It's like, I am Dr. Amy Couturier, the first thing that falls out of your mouth, I'm Amy, I'm a physician, right? Or whatever it may be for you. And I think that's, it's an important thing to think about deeply for yourself. And my advice is, you are not your profession, right? We're all people. We were people before we became doctors. So that's number one. Number two is you can have more than one thing that defines you. And these are the mantras that I use for myself. These are the things that I tell myself when making big career changes like this, because I get a lot of questions. How did you do this? And, oh, how do you feel about that? Do you miss, being a doctor and things like that? And I'm always repeating kind of the same sort of values and principles that nothing's permanent, nothing's forever. And, everything is worth trying if it interests you. And I think creating the ideal life, time back, freedom, money back, things like that is I feel like everybody should have the freedom to do that. And we should normalize these changes when they come up, and we should support one another when that happens. So yeah, no, I feel really supported actually throughout all these changes. My husband's great, and my friends who are physicians and other entrepreneurs, they totally understand, and they're excited for me and want me to help them too. So I don't think there is definitely that identity change, but I think if you're surrounded by people who care for you, who support you, then I think you're going to be just fine. And what's the worst that can happen? You can just go back to what you were doing previously. But if you never try, you just never know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you only have one life to live and one chance, at this. And so it's certainly worth being willing to take a little bit of identity hit to go after your dreams, if that's what it is. And, I think the thing that gets lost sometimes amongst physicians, and, there's a lot of physician Facebook groups and so forth that just give such a hard time to people who are, chasing financial independence or investing in real estate or whatever it is. And I think back to how long this journey was into medicine, right? And to become a physician and go through residency and everything else, that's a long journey, and things change over time, right? And so it is okay to have multiple different passions, and it's okay to be a physician and still love taking care of patients, but maybe only want to do that 2 days a week while you build up this real estate business or whatever that may be. So there's a lot of haters out there. And so for folks who are struggling with that, don't let that get to you. But man, it kind of cracks me up, the comments that people make against physicians who are just trying to think outside the mold and outside of the traditional system.
Absolutely. You're going to, no matter what you do, whether you change from traditional practice to direct primary care, or you're in traditional practice and you start a side business, or you buy real estate, or you become a realtor and sell properties, all kinds of opinions that people will have of you. And again, this kind of goes back to my parents, when I grew up. I always think, they came to this country and they decided to try something, and there's no shame in that. And I think you just have to know for yourself that I'm somebody who has an incredible work ethic. I'm ambitious. I have these skills that I want to try to apply for different things. And just because you're not doing medicine doesn't mean that you're not helping people. And I feel like that is something that gets lost a lot. When you are buying properties and you're creating income streams for your family, that helps your family, your partner, your relationship. It helps you, it helps your kids when they're adults and you have something, generationally to give. It helps, like you say, you talk about the giving freedom later in life. There's always ways to give back, and you're always helping people. So I think when people say that, I think that they don't really understand what the transition means, and they probably haven't thought deeply about it themselves.
Yeah, those are great points. And I also think too about the folks that listen to this podcast, hopefully, it changes their life in some degree. But then the impact that has on their family and on their patients and the number of other people that you touch, you never know what that economic wake is, or what that transformational wake is of people that you've touched along the way. Even going back to your Teach for America days, I'm sure that there are plenty of kids that you impacted that you probably don't even know, and that completely changed their lives. And so there's a lot of different ways to help people, bottom line, as you mentioned, and to make an impact on their life. Well, let's pivot into real estate. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the physician loan because I think it's a very important topic and a very beneficial thing for physicians to think about. I've only used the physician loan in the setting of an already built house. I've not used it in the setting of development. So I'd love to hear what your experience was like with that, although it sounds like maybe a little bit difficult due to the pandemic and some other factors. But why do you think it'd be beneficial for a physician to consider using a physician loan product?
Absolutely. I think it's such a great unlock. Physician loans, what banks offer ebbs and flows with time, right? And supply and demand and the economics of lending. And so when lending gets hard, like maybe times like currently where there's less activity on the real estate market, they're willing to come up with programs that incentivize people. So it's a great time right now, I believe, to look into these programs. If you haven't, I feel like you should always kind of know what opportunities you have to get money. So what we're seeing around here is 10% down, 20%, not 20, but 15% down even on investment properties. I have a physician client right now, and that's what we were recently quoted for their case. And so every bank is also different. The smaller banks, bigger banks, they have different rules and guidelines that they can fall within. So I think it's important for you to reach out to multiple. When we were building our house, I think I called 15 banks. I was like, I want to know, the best product. It makes a huge financial impact. And if you can find a better product, a smaller bank that's willing to help you, I think that's great. That's a great unlock. It just takes a couple of phone calls and emails. So I would advise physicians to look into that. It may or may not help for a second home or investment property, but it can in some cases, especially if you, depending on how you buy a property, if you're buying it, as under your own name versus under an LLC or switching that deed later. So those certain steps may impact what type of loan that you get.
Yeah, for sure. I love physician loans and getting started that way is such an awesome way to do it. There's a lot of no money down primary residence physician loan products available, not typically for new development, at least that's my understanding, but it's a great way to get started. I typically recommend folks think about how you can get a physician loan, no money down, and then house hack that house with all your resident mates or some of your resident mates. And then you're getting paid to go to residency on top of your meager resident salary. And that can be a really great way to get started and start building wealth or tackling your student debt burden as well. So it's a great way to do it. But that's really cool to hear that there are development options that are available that you could you consider tapping into. It's amazing to get 10% down on a development loan can be massive. And as you mentioned, there are some investment loan products that may be lower, 10 to 15% down as well as a physician, because the banks look at us as like, hey, you're a physician. They kind of have that mindset of like, you're a rich physician and you're very lendable. And so the banks look at that and see that that's quite favorable. What tips do you have for physicians who are just getting started in real estate and they want to potentially pursue single family rental of some capacity, whether long-term rental, short-term rental, new development? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with mindset and goal setting. So thinking about, what do you want to accomplish? Is this I just want to buy one and see how we feel sort of thing? Or are you on a mission to offset a certain amount of income? Or is this all because you want to pay zero taxes at the end of the year? Or is it that maybe you really just you want to invest in maybe a commercial business where you can have an income stream that way? So I think it always starts with mindset. So when I talk to clients, physician clients, I'm always asking like, what do you want? What is it? What brought you here in the first place? Why do you feel like real estate maybe could be an avenue for that goal that you were already thinking about? And then once we get into that, I usually advise, what's your risk tolerance and how much are you willing to spend? And then making sure that if someone's married, that they have that partnership, there's alignment there. That's really important, that oftentimes you see one spouse really into real estate and the other not. So I just double check that and give some pause. And then once they're ready to go, my job is to, find them a property that fits within that goal. And I love that because like being a physician, that gives me practice, and that gives me the reps to evaluate more and more properties, and I can't buy all of them. And so I would love to share them, with clients.
That's great. What are you looking for typically in a deal, either for yourself or for clients?
Mhm. Yeah, so we live in an area that's pretty seasonal, so the short-term rental market's nice and strong here. I'm looking for, cash on cash returns, 10% or more. To me, that, and every deal is a little bit different. Some places come furnished, ready to go, turnkey. Some need that initial work. So we kind of do the math, and if it's about 8 to 10%, it's interesting. And then we kind of run a couple different scenarios, like if you are just really lazy about it and don't put in that much work, and it's like, what's the minimum you could make, and as long as you're not going negative, that's great. And then two, if you put in some love and some like excitement and, you put some joy into, running maybe a short-term rental, how much could you make? And then if you really thought about the numbers and treated it like a real business, what is the max potential? And then being in a short-term rental market, I'm always trying to think of other ways, just again, to mitigate some of that risk. Could this be a mid-rental property? Could this be a long-term rental property? Could it be turned into a duplex if needed? Is it zoned for commercial use? So properties like that have a little bit of an out, would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to have those exit strategies and be able to think through that and have those different, scenarios to understand, well, what happens worst case scenario with this home, and how can I potentially put into play one of those exit strategies? So that is great. What's life like now as a realtor, and maybe what are some skills from medicine that have translated into being a successful realtor?
It's scary how certain things are very similar. And these are things that it surprise me every day. Number one is patients and clients, very similar. So, as a doctor, you are listening, you're actively listening, you are guiding, not telling people what to do. There's shared decision making. It's very similar as a realtor, being in a supportive role, a guiding role, someone who can help answer questions and be serve value that way is kind of the same sort of feelings of how it feels to interact with clients or patients. And then, some of the even legality, informed consent, the paperwork that we have to sign, the agency contracts, providing informed consent. It feels a lot like I'm doing a procedure on somebody where I'm going through and I'm saying, this is what you're signing and this is what it means. These are the ways in which you can get out of this. So it's a lot of legal information, but it's really important. And that part gives me a lot of, that makes me really excited to do this work, because that's an area that used to give me a lot of anxiety. It's just the paperwork. What am I signing? What am I getting into? Now being in it and being the one on the other side explaining these contracts, I think is really valuable experience for me personally, and also for clients.
That is great. Do you think that to be a good investor, you need to also be a realtor?
No, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive or, I think being a realtor for me, I didn't necessarily get my realtor's license to become a realtor. I sort of stumbled into it thinking, hey, this is a lot like being a doctor. Maybe I'll like it. And so I decided to get into that because I'm a primary care doctor. I like some of the same things. But no, most people who are investors may get a realtor's license for the convenience, but you don't have to sell real estate to other people to have that. And you don't, even as an investor, you don't have to have a realtor's license. You can work with realtors who can help you find deals and things like that. So there's options across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've always looked at it from the mindset of like, hey, I want to hire the best specialist that I can, that's going to help me from a realtor perspective. I'm willing to give up, whatever that percentage is, because I'd rather work with the best. And a lot of times a really great realtor who really understands the market and the strategy and the goals, they're going to save you in some way a lot more money than they're going to make in commission. And so that can be really beneficial, or get you into a house that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to, and those sorts of things. So it's certainly worth it to work with a good realtor.
And
man,
I think,
this is, yeah.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to add there is, having a physician realtor is really unique because as a doctor, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but you feel like you're always worried that people are taking advantage of you. That are they upcharging you because you're a doctor? Are they not giving you the best deal because they know you're going to get qualified? All of these factors, and so that's another part that's really important to me is not to treat my physician clients just like any other client, and advocate for the very best deals, price wise and terms, regardless of income and their ability to pay. So I think that's really important. It's just that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. That trust, that understanding, the similar mindset, similar way of thinking, like all those sorts of things are so relatable. And you're exactly right. We do get preyed upon quite often. And so I think it's helpful for folks to hear podcasts like this and hear your journey and look at other resources and get that financial education and foundation so that they're not taken advantage of. That's really great advice. Amy, before we kind of wrap things up here, what's something that you're working on right now that you're really passionate about?
Yeah, right now I'm working on a lot of tools that physicians can use to help them understand deals, to help them with that mindset, risk tolerance, to think a little bit more like an investor would. So I'm just building some tools that I've noticed.
All right, Amy, some technical difficulties. Glad we're able to hop back on. But what are you working on right now that you're passionate about?
Yeah, right now I'm working on tools that would help physician investors. So working on a hot sheet where I find properties that are cash flowing, at least that 8 to 10% or more, and creating a listserv of interested buyers and investors who can just peruse that and determine whether or not it fits within their goals. Also working on other tools for physician investors. I've built a cash on cash return calculator, but also just there's a lot of questions about the tax benefits. And so creating some guidelines, definitions of real estate professional status versus short-term rental loophole. What are the differences? A lot of people really want to walk through that mental benefit really before, deciding to buy a property, which is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. That is awesome. Well, if folks want to reach out to you, they want to know more, they want to potentially work with you, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, I have an email that would be great, amy@𝗪𝗏celifestyle.com, or you can find me on Instagram, amy_Couturier MD. I love to be active there and check on my DMs and things like that. So more than happy to connect with anybody who's interested in the Northern Michigan market or just want to learn a little bit more about investing and, how they can, whether or not buying a short-term rental or buying real estate in general fits within their goals of investing.
That is great. Yeah. And for folks who have not been to Traverse City, Northern Michigan, it is absolutely beautiful. So make sure to take some time to get out there. Sleeping Bear Dunes is one of our favorites. The Cherry Festival in Traverse City is amazing. It's a gorgeous place. So add it to your list for sure.
Yeah, we'd love it. And I'd love to connect if you're ever up here on vacation too. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. Well, Amy, this has been such a great conversation. I love your journey and your message that real estate is not only incredible for physicians, but it's also a learnable skill that you just have to have those mindset shifts to be able to make that understanding and get that alternative income and make more impact as a whole. So your story is a great reminder that folks don't have to stay trapped in just one version of medicine or one version of success. You have the opportunity to pivot if that's what fits your journey, fits your goals, fits your lifestyle. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care. And with that, we'll go ahead and sign off.
Hey, real quick, if you're still listening to this, I'm assuming you got value from it. So I need your help specifically. My 2-year vision with this podcast is to help 100,000 physicians learn how investing in real estate can give you the freedom to practice medicine and live life how you want. There are 2 main ways that a podcast grows. One is through ratings and reviews, and the other is word of mouth. If you can please leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as send this to 1 to 2 friends that you think would get value from it, we can reach the physicians that we want to reach. Thanks in advance, and talk to you on the next episode. Please note that the information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or medical advice. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the host and the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.